Whenever you are ready, I think you can flip the switch. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the special board meeting for Tuesday, December 29th, 2020. We're going to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Akbar.
Here.
Mr. Alexander.
Present.
Ms. Autry.
Here.
Mr. Bravo.
Here.
Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Here.
Mrs. McKittrick.
Here.
Thank you. And if we could all mute our microphones and if you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday evening to join us for what will be our final board meeting for 2020. I'm sure we'll all be glad to put this year behind us. But Dr. Akbar and I were having some conversations here recently and decided we'd like to schedule some time to get together to talk over a few items. So there are really just a few items on the agenda this evening. The first of which is business related. And so we're going to hand that over to the superintendent and to Deb Folk in just a moment. After that, there will be one item for approval. And then we're going to talk a little bit about 2020 in review, some challenges, some successes, and some goals for next year, things that we need to keep in mind as we head into 2021. We're going to work through a little bit our advanced APS documents, and we've got some opportunities for you to provide some feedback to us before we would ask you to approve this on the 11th so that we can then incorporate it into our district profile. We'll talk a little bit about our committee structure for 2021, and then we'll wrap up just going over process for the organizational meeting. With that, I'd like to turn it over, and let me say too, however you may celebrate the holidays or the coming new year, I hope you all have had a good time and have found some time to relax and spend it with family and enjoy this season. So welcome and thank you. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President. So before I make a recommendation, I'd like Mrs. Folk to review the item that's on the business affairs agenda for us.
Good evening, everybody. As you are aware, there has been a major hack of SolarWinds, which is a network management service that operates in watching the traffic that goes through a number of networks, including federal networks, governmental state networks, recent college networks, as well as some of the large Fortune 500 corporations. We worked very carefully with Homeland Security when this breach was announced, and it has been recommended that we as Akron Public Schools no longer use SolarWinds to monitor our network traffic. So Mr. Lawson and Mr. Doxey have gone out to procure and look at another service that we could put into place as soon as possible, as we have dislocated ourselves from SolarWinds, and we are recommending that the WhatsApp application be put into service for 1 year so that we can make sure that we can monitor our traffic and keep ourselves aware of who's trying to get into our network, whether people are moving out of our network, and how that we can secure the data that goes back and forth among our buildings and out to our students, especially during this time while we're doing online network process. So that is the recommendation we're placing before you this evening. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to try and answer them.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Folk? Okay, I don't believe we have any.
So with that, Mr. President, I wish to recommend approval of the business affairs recommendation presented in category 2.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Autry, a second from Mr. Alexander. Last chance. Any comments, questions, discussion on this item? All right, hearing and seeing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Autry,
Yes.
Mr. Bravo,
Yes.
Dr. Hall,
Aye.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. McKittrick,
Yes.
Dr. Akbar,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Folk. All right, so earlier today, we received final comments back from senior staff. They were helping us, or have been helping us, to fill in the metrics on the advanced APS document that we worked on during our retreat in August. And Dr. Akbar and I have been following up on that. We spent some time on it together, and senior staff has spent some time on it. I sent the edits out to you today, and we just kind of wanted to take a look at that. And I had skipped our agenda. We were supposed to start with the 2020 year in review. So while we start that, why don't you, if you get a chance, if you can pull that document up, and we'll give you time to pull that up and look through it while we do our 2020 discussion, maybe stay on track with the agenda. 2020 has been an interesting year for all of us. We had changes at the board level. We've had changes at the district level. We've had a global pandemic. We've been facing down a financial crisis that's impending, or at least coming soon. We've had a lot of challenges this year, but we've also had successes as we continue to build our partnerships around college and career academies. We've had some really good work coming out of our various committees on our policies. So we just kind of wanted to take a few minutes and give everyone a chance to maybe bring up or talk about some of the successes and challenges that we've had, and also things that you believe should be goals as we head into 2021. And I will start a document and keep a list, and I will share it with all of you. We can have kind of a record of those things that you listed out this evening. But just kind of want to open it up. And Dr. Akbar, I don't know if you'd like to kick things off, or if you'd like to add something to that.
No, I'm really eager to hear what everyone has to say.
Hey, this is Derek. If Patrick, if you wouldn't mind going first, to kind of model, it might help kind of get this ball rolling. If you could kind of provide a model response.
Sure. Certainly some of the challenges obviously the biggest challenge that we've probably faced this year is the global pandemic, right? And it's changed the way that we function as a district, the way that we do business, the way that we work with our staff, whether or not we're in school or not in school. So obviously I would say that probably our biggest challenge this year has been the global pandemic. What I would see as a goal for next year is, and as soon as possible, is figuring out how we provide our students some additional supports and get our students back in the classroom. I think that has to be a priority for us going into 21. That's me personally. I also think, as I mentioned a minute ago, probably one of the next biggest challenges that I think we faced this year, because it certainly has impacted some of the decisions that we've made despite the resources that we've received from the CARES Act. One of the biggest, and the possibility of a fair school funding plan coming in the next legislature, the next General Assembly. One of the biggest challenges that we face, and also a goal for next year that this board is going to have to decide sooner rather than later, is what we do about the pending financial crisis that we are kind of facing as a district. And we have really two opportunities outside of anything special to put something on the ballot next year. And that first opportunity there's a timeline that's already set by statute where we need to start making some decisions about how and whether we're going to move forward with putting something on the ballot earlier and later if needed, or just later. So certainly those are two of the biggest challenges that I think we're facing right now. Third would also in that list, and I don't know if they're really in order, but third amongst those probably is our superintendent search. We still have a district profile that we need to build. And so also in that vein, just as a reminder, if you haven't yet provided any comments or feedback to Mr. Horton at OSBA, you may want to do so if you'd like to add something or change something or see something included in that district profile. And by the way, of course, Advance APS, which is on the agenda tonight, is going to be part of that document, or that's the idea, is that it would be part of that document so that the next superintendent knows what our goals are for the next few years for Akron Public Schools. So those are some of the challenges, and I will type them in here now that I've said them. And just so you know, and Dr. Hall, thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. I've started sort of 3 categories on this document, and I'll share it out even while we're sitting here so that maybe you can see as I'm typing them. But successes, I mean, we should be celebrating the fact that we, the IB program, we should be celebrating the fact that we've grown and strengthened our partnerships around college and career academies. There's lots of things that we should be sort of giving shout outs to as well. Mr. Pendleton's work on the Fair School Funding Plan. I mean, there's plenty of things that despite COVID, this district has done and done very well this year. All of the work that's come out of the committees and the work that you all have put in, the extra time to keep moving the needle, even though we're all moving it remotely. So I don't want to just make it sound like it's doom and gloom and it's all challenges, but off the top of my head, that's how I would start. And I'd love to hear from you also.
Well, Patrick, I'll jump in. You basically said everything that I was going to say. I had them written down here, but yeah, the challenges was the pandemic, and the pandemic in a number of ways. Pandemic for the challenges for our students, challenges for the parents, challenges for the district, challenges all around for even our administration, and it's been a major challenge, been a major adjustment. The positive thing that come out of I think with this here is that we started our students with one-to-one years ago, so it was an advantage for us here in Akron Public Schools. I think that was a good move, and whether we knew it was a good move or not, there's something we were talking about doing, and we did it. So I think that was something positive. Yeah, another challenge is the superintendent search, and to be honest, I never hoped that I would have to go through a superintendent search in my tenure on the Akron School Board, but it is here, and that is going to be a challenge to make sure we get someone who will be the right fit for our district, to make sure our district is the right size, and to be able to fill the shoes that Superintendent Dr. James has done, and all the things that we have done already with the district, and take them to another level. Another challenge is the levy. I mean, this is a tough time, very tough time for everyone, and people throughout the United States and probably throughout the world, as with the pandemic and the challenge that we have of finances. And so that's going to be a major challenge. Our district needs it bad. We're going to need it, but that's going to be a challenge to get people to try to pass the levy when we put it on the ballot. You did talk about the college and career services. I thought that was a plus. It's always been a plus for me. It's something that's dear to me, because I think that this is something that's really helps our students, and will help them in the future, and will continue to help them. The IB, we're getting so many our schools and are involved with the IB, and with the new IB program that we have for Portage Path is big. School funding was big. One of the things I applaud Ryan to the hilt, because he was one of the individuals, if not the individual, who started this talk, and something that needed to come, need to be discussed, and need to have something done, because years and years and years out, that this has been deemed the way that we fund education is unconstitutional, has been unconstitutional, and it continues to be unconstitutional. So that needs to be changed. But that was a very positive piece for us, that we had our CFO at the head of doing these things and trying to head the work that he did down in Columbus. So I thought that was very big. And then also the resolution that I thought was big with the challenging times today with race and things that are going on that Dr. Akbar had brought to us, the resolution on racial equality and looking at race as I'm losing my thought here, but looking at the system and how the system needs to be changed and reformed to address race and racial issues that go on throughout the country. So I think those are some positive things. I think those things are going to move and propel our district forward in the long run. And so I'm very proud of those. There will be some challenges that we have to face, but I think we can overcome them. It's going to have to be teamwork with all of us, meaning, us as board members, the superintendent, this cabinet, and all those who work for APS, as well as the community, which is a major piece of the community, and our corporate partners, because I can't say enough about our corporate partners, because if it wasn't for the corporate partners, we would not have the college and career academies pieces that we have. And so I have to take this time to thank them, because I didn't do that early in the year, but I want to thank our corporate partners for all that they have done and what they continue to do for our students here in Akron Public Schools and Akron Public School District. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Ms. Mansfield?
So I'm going to jump straight to the things that I thought were great, because I think you guys really covered a lot of the challenges. One thing that can't be said enough are the staff that went back right away, the custodial staff, the cafeteria staff, all the warehouse staff, all the people who, they say that, you could tell I come from a military family, right? Because everything moves on our logistics, and nothing moves if people don't get fed. So not only do we make sure that, did those folks make sure that they came to work and they kept themselves as safe as possible, but they fed thousands of children, and that were ours and that were other schools during the heart of the worst part of this lockdown and scariest part, when none of us knew anything yet. All we knew is we couldn't go anywhere. And so every day that goes by, every time I'm out driving and I pass flashing lights during a school day right now, and at the different hours that they do, because of when kids should be in class, those are the people that I think about. And, when it gets right down to it, those are the folks that have the most to lose and are often leaving their own kiddos at home in order to make those things happen for us. So those are people I really want to talk about. But you also can't let that go by without talking about a district as big as ours that managed to flip from brick and mortar to all online in just a matter of weeks. And again, like Mr. Alexander said, some of that has to do with work that we started a decade ago, but also is a huge testament to our teachers and administration, who not only embraced remote, but then spent the better part of their summer and the 2 weeks that they had at the beginning of the year taking a craft that they knew so well and turning it into a whole new kind of learning, and that's incredibly dynamic and diverse and deep, and allows for some kids who never have been able to thrive to really thrive in this environment. We know it doesn't work for everyone, and that's why, like Patrick, I think our biggest challenge going forward is figuring out how to make people feel confident enough to come back into those brick and mortar. It's been a hard switch, but we just can't thank everyone enough for that. It's kind of become cliche, but I don't care, and it's a meme, but I just love it that people say that students are failing during this time, and that's not true. They're surviving a global pandemic, and I don't think that when people look back at what we did, hopefully it's another 100 years from now, and hopefully we've got some good records, because I would love to know how they did 2018 or 1918 a little bit better. But when they look back, that's how they see us, is that not only did our kids survive, but many of them were thriving, and we kept them moving in the right direction. So that's as poetic as I feel like I need to get. I think that we're just beginning to celebrate the incredible career of David James, and he's going to be hard to replace. I love the way our senior staff came together. I watched Ryan and David and Ellen work in ways that have just been amazing in the last year and a half or so, especially. And I also think that the other thing that will be remembered for in this, when this is in the history books, is that declaration of racism as a public health emergency. And so huge thanks to Dr. Akbar for helping to write that, and for us as a board for having the foresight, not only to have this be a statement, but also to have steps and real significant things that we want to see happen through that policy and through statements that were made, so that it's not just a declaration. If it is, it's more like the Declaration of Independence was, right? It made things happen. It wasn't just a speech. So this is going to make things happen, and I hope that it makes things happen for our students and families in a real and meaningful way. If the seven of us have anything to say about it, and this administration have anything to say about it, that's what it'll be. So I guess those are the things that I think are going to eventually be our legacies in many ways, or how we handle those things. We got a lot to do. We got a lot of work to do. We're not resting on anything we've done, because this year is going to be challenging. We're going to have to figure out how do we catch everybody up to wherever we think they're supposed to be? How do we get these seniors to graduation? How do we get these little kiddos reading? And so those are the things that I'm thinking about, is how do we help our staff help make those things happen in 2021? And yes, that probably involves the levy, and yes, that involves a really good superintendent. But when you take it down to the part that matters most, it's about those individual kids getting the best out of 2020, 2021 school year as they possibly can. So thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. And I did share in the chat that I have shared that document with you. Someone's already added some qualifiers to the COVID-19 as challenges, both between academic recovery and operations. So feel free to look at that either now or later, but it'll be available to you. So whatever notes you're giving me, I'm adding to our document. Who else would like to talk about successes, challenges, goals? Yes, Mrs. Autry, Ms. Autry.
Yes, thank you. So I'm not going to repeat everything. I think so far everyone's kind of hit upon our challenges that we are facing in terms of the levy. Of course, that's major for us, and something we really need to jump on yesterday. As far as our successes, I would like to think that this district has really been able to show its value throughout this whole pandemic, not only to our students who attend our district, but even those outside of our district who we've been able to feed and support throughout all of this. I think that's really major. Also, I think one of our successes is how our teachers, our families, and our students have navigated through all of this. And it's been hard, and it's been challenging and difficult, but despite all of that, they're still here with us, working as a team and making it happen. And Lisa hit upon it as far as how we just essentially flipped our district. And it looked seamless, but I know there was a lot of hard work behind that. So we did a great job, I think, with a district our size being able to do that. Also, another success, I believe, is Ryan's leadership on the Fair School Funding Plan. That has been great for us to have, our own treasurer involved in that process. And then I'll just tie that right into a goal, I think, is to continue educating our families, our community about some of those things, because we're going to need for those things to, come to fruition. There's a lot of hard work that was put into it. So I'm just hoping that we can have a goal of harnessing some of the energy that we've seen from our families and community, so that we can advocate for the things that we need in our district. And then just also echoing President Bravo in terms of getting our students back in the buildings. And again, this is dependent on the COVID virus and how it decides it's going to, affect us, and how we're going to be able to, adjust to whatever it may lead us. But we've shown, I believe, already that we can be responsive and flexible. So I think that's kind of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atri. Dr. Akbar?
Yes, thank you to everyone who's shared so far. I think that we have a year that we should be definitely proud of, at least as far as how we've traveled through the turbulence. Not the fact that we hit multiple areas or pockets of turbulence throughout the year. I think that we've done a great job. So, one of the things that we did, at the very beginning of the years, we made it easier for the community to be involved in our meetings, and to let their voices be heard. Did we know that the pandemic was going to be ripe for that opportunity to be utilized? No, we did not, but it did make that possible in a way that wasn't, operationalized previously. I think that's something we should be proud of, regardless of, the fact that we did get an abundance of feedback on both sides of every issue that we dealt with. It's good to know that we give people opportunity to have their voices heard. I think Lisa and Patrick mentioned this about racism as a public health crisis. I think that's something that we definitely should be proud of. The fact that we didn't just make a condemnation statement, that we did say that there were things we were going to do, and we followed up on it. And this year with dual pandemics and crises, that we face, our essential employees, as Ms. Autry mentioned, has been essential beyond just in a title, but in our community, and has played a vital role in uplifting and continuing our community at a time where there was even more uncertainty than there is right now. When we first started the pandemic and shifting over from brick and mortar learning to virtual learning, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, and those employees who are considered essential employees, as well as our teachers and school building staff members, they went above and beyond duty. They worked more hours and complained less. And I think that we owe them a debt of gratitude, contrary to what some people thought, that virtual learning means they're not working, which, we know is not the truth. The One to World initiative, which, Ms. Mansfield and Mr. Alexander, and I think even Mr. Bravo mentioned, was a great investment to allow us to flip the district in a short period of time. I think that's a success we should be proud of. It wasn't done for this, but it definitely paid off. And our business partners continue to show us their innovative ways working with our district. We've seen that with different innovative programs. We should also be proud of, the 20 years that HIP, for example, has made a difference in students' lives, and won the award from, diversity I think it's diversity inside diversity. I think that's what it is. And so those are all things we should be proud of. And I think the challenges moving forward, I think there's a few obviously, but three that essentially come to mind is passing the levy. I know we decided to hold off on the levy this past year. I'm not sure how much longer we can hold off on that, and so moving that forward and getting that passed by the community and showing them how we have been good stewards of their funds over the last 9 years without a levy, and the essential basically purpose that our laws put in place that require us to come back for a levy. And Mr. Pendleton's work at the State House, is sad that the Senate couldn't get off their tuchuses and actually make that happen. And that's the nicest way I can actually say that. But that was a failure not on Mr. Pendleton and all the advocates' parts. They did a wonderful job. That was a failure on our Ohio Senate's part, the closest we've ever gotten in the state since DeRoth to actually fixing our funding formula, and they basically did nothing. And now it's going to be even harder. So all the hard work that Mr. Pendleton did do, unfortunately, will be even harder trying to pass it in a biannual budget, with all the different pork and different things. I don't have to tell you all about this, but there's going to be a lot of competing interests for the funds, and unfortunately, that's going to make it difficult. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't fight and we shouldn't support Mr. Pendleton and everyone else that will be advocating for that to go forward. And I think that's another challenge that we'll have as a board, is to figure out how do we actively become engaged in that process in the Senate Finance Committee, and how do we do testimonies, and how do we provide statements to showcase how it's pivotally important to happen. So those are all things that will be a challenge, but is necessary. Recovery from the pandemic also will be a big challenge, because there's multi-facets to that recovery. It's not just the students in the schools. Yes, it is definitely the students and their learning loss, but it's also operations. It is, looking at our facilities, the ones that have not been operational in a while, and, looking at what has stopped working. Because that what happens when you don't use certain things in older buildings. We know things just stop working. So how would that, hopefully that doesn't happen, but we know it's a possibility. So looking at all the different ways we have to recover from this pandemic. And then I'll say this last thing is a challenge, because I think we've been talking about it for so long, is how do we use grant funds and even creative ideas on making our CLCs more accessible once we're able to get back into the buildings, so that we can really galvanize around the energy of the community within our schools and within the APS workings. I think that's that energy. We don't want to lose it, whether we agree with what some individuals have to say, or we agree or we disagree with them. It's good to see that engagement, and I think we want to keep that going. So those are the things that I would say will be our challenges and our successes.
Thank you, Dr. Akbar. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Mr. Bravo. So I am not going to repeat everything that's been said. So I only have a couple comments to make. So first off, to echo Dr. Akbar's point, I'm very grateful for the already conveyed sentiments of this group. The only thing that I would add would fall under the categories of some goals for next year, i.e. 2021. And that would be around, I know Dr. James has talked with this group several times about the idea of a third term. I am 100% in support of that, and I would like to see that come to fruition, and really kind of get its feet under, especially this coming summer with how far behind a lot of our kids have fallen. And so that means, us finding a way to work with our partners, over at AEA, et cetera. So so that for me it would be a goal for 2021 to make sure that happens. And moreover, I would love to see that work hopefully form the foundation for us being able to offer a summer term moving forward, on an annual basis. That would provide, and obviously there's much more in the way of details that we could talk through, but at a high level, would love to see something that offered both college prep as well as, sort of career tech ed type of pathways and enrichment opportunities for our students that would last over the summer. And again, we can talk about how many weeks that term would be, but so keeping it at a high level, I'm saying philosophically, I'd like us to do that this summer. And do it in such a way that allows it to be sustainable. So that's really kind of the main thing I'd love to see for a goal for 2021 that hasn't already been mentioned. So I would echo the other goals that you all have conveyed. And so that's really kind of the main thrust of my comment. And I'll see the floor back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone from our senior staff that would like to chime in on anything they heard or anything they'd like to add? I know a few of you put something in the document, so thank you for that. Anyone like to add on? Okay.
I was just going to say, Mr. President, those sound like great goals. Really, especially I support all of them, but I loved what Dr. Hall said about the third semester. That's been a goal for us, and this is a great opportunity to start something this summer and then see if we can make it sustainable.
That's been a goal of mine for a really long time, and we're monitoring the additional funding that should be hitting schools. I know Ryan's reached out to me on what I know. I'm asking him what he knows. Some of my colleagues in the Ohio 8 who are members of the Council of Great City Schools, I think, are getting some information. So, I'm hopeful that there might be some flexibility in that funding where we could use it for some of it for academic recovery, at least this year, and use it to actually pilot that third semester. So I'm real hopeful because I know our kids are going to need it.
Good, thank you. I love that there are more successes than challenges that everybody came up with. That says something, I think. So appreciate all the feedback. I did share this document with you. Well, Mrs. McKittrick, you have your hand up. Is that on purpose?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm chiming in late. I
No,
guess
that's okay.
that in all of the planning that we do and the looking back and looking forward, from a levy to a superintendent, that what we ultimately keep in mind, as we always do, but just a gentle reminder that it's always what's best for our kids, right? That no matter what decisions we make, the bottom line is we always go back and make sure that the decisions we make are always in their best interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McKittrick. Well said. All right, I have shared this document with you. Feel free to add to it. It'll give us a looking point, or at least a lens, as we head into 2021 to remember what we said about this year, what we were proud of, and what we know we need to work on. So thank you for that exercise. I appreciate it. Number 2 on the agenda, just to keep things moving then, is our advanced APS document. As I said a few minutes ago, I sent that out earlier. Senior staff has been working on those areas where we still needed to add some metrics, some percentages, some return on investment metric that we could use for our advanced APS document. Before we make this final, the goal would be that we would pass this on the 11th. So as part of the business portion of our organizational meeting, that we would pass this on the 11th, that would then set our goals for the next 3 years. We've tried to make our goals specific, measurable, objective. And so that's kind of what senior staff has been working on. And then it would also be folded into the district profile for our superintendent search. So what we'd like to do is just point it out to you. There are still a few areas, if you're on the document now, that are in yellow that we need to answer some questions around. But what we'd like to do is get some feedback from you by next Wednesday, January 6th. That would then give us time to incorporate any comments or feedback or answer any questions or clarify or change some word choice, whatever that might be. We would do that by Friday, January 8th. And then we would get that back to you by Friday, January 8th, ahead of our meeting on January 11th. And so I see that several of you are in there now. This is, again, the same document that we started out with in our board retreat. It's the Advance APS 3-in-3 plan, 3 goals in 3 years with some sort of sub goals underneath. And so I want to open it up now for any discussion or questions or things that are standing out to you as you're kind of reading through it, or maybe read through it earlier. So I'll stop there. And if we don't have any, that's okay. Or if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, that's okay.
Well, I'd like to just say 2 things really quickly, if I can.
Absolutely.
One, I think that the Advanced APS as a whole will help serve as a launch pad for our district into this next era, as we are, really looking at how do we consolidate what it is that we need to do, but then also become laser focused on what is on our agenda in the next few years. There's so many different things that we can do, so many different things that we could be doing, but I think that Advanced APS with those 3 solid goals really puts us on a pathway to be laser focused on the goals that we want to attend to, and also map back a lot of our new initiatives. When you think about a pandemic turning your district upside down, and then coming back to figure out what should we be doing, and what should we be possibly spring cleaning, this is a great opportunity to use this document to move forward, because so many, the second part is, as we do recover from the pandemic, which, Lord willing, it'll be this year in 2021. There'll be so much eagerness, I think, in some ways, to return back to how things used to be. And I don't think that that's what we want to do. I think we want to have some sense of normalcy, but we also want to continue to move forward and utilize the innovation that has happened during this pandemic to continue to stretch us even further. And then also use this as an opportunity to stop doing things that we've always done, but may not need to do even further. And those are hard conversations to have sometimes, as people get attached to things that they've done forever. I think this gives us an opportunity to set course and level set that conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Akbar. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. President, I'll jump in. Ms. Mansfield, did you have anything that you want to say first?
You can go first, Dr. Hall.
Okay. All right. No, so I'm just going to say, really two things. One, and I didn't see this in the document, and obviously we don't want to boil the ocean because again, if you prioritize everything, then nothing's prioritized, right? And so one of the things I want to mention was that with respect to the CC with the college and career academies, when I was perusing the document, what I didn't see in there that I'd really like us to spend some time on, not tonight per se, but as we move forward is, I saw that we want one of our goals is to increase the number of partners from 269 to 300. I think that over the next 3 years, what we have to be able to do at some point in the next 3 years is to be able to evaluate the quality of those partnerships. So whether looking at job placement rates with those partners, again, just developing as a team, what metrics are we going to use to determine, to really sort of determine whether or not a partnership has been a success. In some ways, what comes to mind is that musical Rent, Miss Mansfield, where they say, how do you measure a year? Daylight, sunsets, and cups of coffee, right? So how do we evaluate the success of our partnerships, right? Is it based on job placement rates? Is it based upon hours that they've provided as far as hours donated by their employees, or is it is it items donated? I mean, like how do we measure the success of a community partnership? And so we may even decide over time to take those partnerships and stratify them by tiers. A tier 1 partner is this, a tier 2 partner is that, a tier 3 partner is this, and be developing sort of success metrics for each tier, right? So that way we're not trying to apply a one size fits all approach to determining what success looks like to a company the size of SUMA versus a small business that partners with us that has way less than way of resources to allocate and assist, right? So that's something I really would. So that's a next step in the next 3 years. I would really like us to be able to come up with as a team. And then the other item would be, I'm gonna keep ringing this bell, and that is around this third term. So I didn't see in the document, where establishing a third term would fall. Whether that's under the engagement section. Again, whether that's under the equity section. But where, because you could argue it could be placed under equity, because in large part, in my mind, that third term is a way at trying to close the achievement gap that exists between, say, APS and some of the suburban and/or private schools, right? So again, where does the third term and the development and the continuation and sustainment of that, where does that fall? So those are my comments, and I'll see the floor back to you.
Thank you. Good comments. And we'll make a note, or if someone hasn't already, maybe to look at where we might include that summer semester, third semester, and where that might go. Mr. Alexander, I see your hand up. Did you also have something to add?
No, I'm sorry. Let me lower my hand.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Mansfield, you had something then also?
I'm still trying to recover from Dr. Hall's musical theater reference. So, now that that's going to be stuck in my head all night, I will be texting you later to tell you it's still stuck there, but I am so there for it. And you can drop those in anytime you want in conversation. I appreciate it. One thing I had was a question, and I do not know why. I am totally not remembering this. And then I have a comment about the third term. I do not remember what employee resource groups are. I remember that conversation. I remember the term, but I cannot for the life of me remember what that is. Can somebody remind me what that is?
Dr. Akbar?
Sure. Well, just from a standpoint, I met with our first group around employee resource groups, and it's kind of like model what Goodyear's been doing. So there's a group around, like our African American group. There's like at Goodyear, there's a women's group, and several others. And they're really around more of a grassroots buildup of issues and concerns they may have, and then to empower them to actually make recommendations and make changes in the organization.
Perfect. Okay. I kind of thought that's what it was, but I just needed to have that clarified. And then just an idea on the third term, as we're mentioning that, I can't say enough times how many people stop and talk to me about the I Promise School and how isn't that great? And I think that one of our best ins for explaining without, using phrases that freak people out, like year-round schools kind of freak people in Ohio out a little bit, and third term may even. But if we cage the conversation in we're doing something similar to that, or hopefully it's even beyond that. But just thinking on what a fantastic way and in it is for us to basically do what we're doing, right? Is we're learning from what we can do at the I Promise School and we're applying that elsewhere. That's the whole purpose of those specialty schools like I Promise and STEM and others, is that we learn from what works and what doesn't. So just taking a look at how well those well-placed breaks and how what a collaborative process that's been, not just with the foundation, but also with AEA. So just wanted to throw that into the conversation, and thanks for that explanation too.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, just to add two things. One, just to go back to employee resource groups, and thank you to Dr. James for the explanation. I think we'll to extend that explanation, as employee resource groups can make suggestions for changes to how the organization can improve climate for that particular group of staff member, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's veterans, whether it's women, whatever it is. But more importantly, it's also a way to build stronger sense of belongings and stronger climate within those groups, because you have more of a critical mass, which you may not necessarily see in individual buildings, but you get that support around challenges, around successes, and the way in which you might even view or position yourself within education based upon your veteran status or your gender or whatever that is. So it gives you that opportunity as well. And so it does two things. One, it could help with our retention and increase our ability to retain high quality, diverse candidates or teachers within the district. But then two, it also will help us attract potentially new diverse candidates by having the support system there in the district. So it can do all of those things and more. So it serves as a resource for employees. And then there was one other thing. I'm sorry. As far as the year-round school, we didn't call it that. Third term. I'm sorry, third term. I don't want to get anybody riled up here. But as we consider third term, and the advanced APS, that can go under achievement or equity, but we do know that in the achievement, we have increased our graduation rate, which the only way you're going to do it is to look at who is not graduating now and to close those gaps between those different groups. And typically that's along race and socioeconomic status. And so if we look at those two groups, and even it could be even targeted to certain schools, once we look at that data, that will tell us who needs to be targeted. And that third term, by getting students the support they need sooner and more extensively, could help us reach that graduation goal. So just wanted to add those points.
Thank you, Dr. Akbar, and thank you, Dr. McWilliams-Woods, for making real-time changes. We appreciate that. Who else would like to add something to this document or has a thought about it or question? Anyone? All right. Well, please take time to look at it if you can. We're hoping if you could, please give us some responses back by January 6th. You can either make comments in the document, feel free to send an email to Dr. Akbar and myself, and we'll get it included if that's easier for you. However you'd like to get those back to us, we're just hoping to get some comments, questions, feedback, concerns, anything you have by next Wednesday. We'll get those incorporated or answered or whatever the case may be by Friday and get it back out to you. And then we'll be prepared to vote on it on January 11th, if that works for everyone. Okay. All right. So moving us on to the next item of business. At our last meeting, the draft bylaw for committee structure was presented for first reading. As we begin thinking about our preferences for committee placement and our assignments as we move into 2021, we need to be thinking about that policy. If you were to go to board docs, and it might be the easiest and fastest way for you to find it, if you were to go back to board docs to the last meeting, December 14th, I believe it was. Am I wrong? I think I'm right. December 14th, if you go back to that meeting and go down to board policy development, there is a link, and I believe it's bylaw 0155, and there's a link to the Google document that has the latest or most current draft of that bylaw. Now, for the old timers, you'll remember that once upon a time, we had our policies. So we're always governed by statute first, and then our policies and our bylaws. And for some reason, we had one additional document called rules and regulations. And it was superfluous. And oftentimes our rules and regulations would conflict inadvertently just because of updates that were made to policies or bylaws or administrative guidelines or something else. Our rules and regulations would conflict with our policies or our bylaws or state statute or something. Our rules and regulations, we didn't need them. They were largely, again, superfluous. But that's where we listed our standing committees and things like that. So when we got rid of those, we also went down to a more watered version of our current bylaws on committees, which is very general and very nice. And we could also choose to leave it that way, or we could adopt this more comprehensive policy. Dr. Akbar and I were talking about it previously. It probably is a good idea for the board to spell out somewhere in writing committees are. And then we need to define membership. So if you have a chance and can bring that up, it'd be good for you to at least look at it while we're chatting about it now. Because we do have some items that we need to talk about. Again, Dr. Akbar and I were also talking about the committee. Did we just lose someone? We just lost Mr. Alexander. So if we could pause the conversation, hopefully for the last time in 2020, and give him a chance to rejoin. I'm also sending him a message offline just to make sure he's able to rejoin. Welcome back, Mr. Alexander. We waited for you. So if you're able to bring up that document, it'd be great. We do have a few things to decide. Obviously, our standing committees currently are legal and board policy, finance and capital management, instructional policy, and student achievement. We're now adding the equity committee. We also need to split up the membership. So that's going to require that our board also serve on more than one committee so that we don't have any quorum issues moving forward. The way that Dr. Akbar and I think are figuring it out is that we may be able to do it with everyone serving on 2 committees. If we also then make the president an official member of all committees, we think we can accomplish it with everyone serving on 2 committees. Is that right, Dr. Akbar? I saw you. Okay.
Yes, yes, it is.
All right. So we need to know from the board. We can either work on this as sort of a working session tonight, iron out a few of the questions that we have, waive the 3 readings and pass it tonight, or you can take it and look at it. We can send some information to you between now and January 11th, and we can pass it before those appointments are made on January 11th. So that's probably the first thing we need to decide is how deeply you want to dive into this tonight. And I'll open it up in case anyone has a preference or a thought around that.
I think it would be great to talk about it tonight so that the decisions we're making on January 11th are prepared for if you don't think it'll be too crazy. I do have one question. That would be, that's a lot of work for the president. The president already has a lot of things to do. Attending that many committee meetings a month is a lot of requirement. Is there a way to split it up between the president and the vice president? Is there, I don't mind the idea. I'm just, concerned about the sanity of whoever's sitting in that chair at any given year.
Now, having done that this year, I will say it's completely doable. I've attended, I would say, the majority of all committee meetings this year. It is doable. It does take a lot of extra time. The president has always been a member of all committees. We stuck on the word ex officio on there, which has never really made sense to me. And I know I've asked that question before because the board does not delegate any legal authority to the committees outside of the board, so to act in place of the board. So it doesn't necessarily make any difference, though, like I pointed out to Dr. Akbar too, if we want, I'm making those statements, but of course we can always ask our legal counsel to weigh in too. But it's never made sense to me why we have the ex officio title on there, because we also pay the board president for every meeting that he or she attends throughout the year. So, up to that $5,000 annual max, which I told Dr. Akbar, I think I met that by June of this year.
Patrick, with all due respect to that, just and your superhumanness, jumping into a virtual meeting is a little bit different than being at the board. And I wonder if would have been able to handle that had we all been meeting in person for every single one of those. Now, if there's still the option, if going forward, we have committees that we can attend both ways, even after the pandemic's over. I don't know what legally how that's going to flesh out in the long run. But I don't know if you'd been without a time turner, not a musical theater reference, Dr. Hall, but
Harry Potter.
Right. Then I don't know if you'd have been able to do it. I'm just curious if you wonder.
Yeah, now if there's enough membership on the committee too, it may not necessarily matter if, again, unless you had more than one committee member unable to make the meeting. If that's something that we need to figure out, then it also changes potentially the math on the rest of the committees. You'd have the vice president and the president splitting each of those and those. So then they'd be each on their, so they'd each be on two committees. But not overlapping, right, Dr. Akbar, if I'm doing the math right? So they would serve, so everybody would serve on two.
Yeah, so it would be difficult. It will actually be probably the president and vice president serving on 3 committees, but because one of them would have to be their actual committee. So it's not hard math. I would call it simple math, but it takes a little bit of explaining to do. But what I think makes more sense is if, at least the way we explained it, if we have 4 members on each committee, the board president could be on every committee, but doesn't mean that person needs to go to every meeting. It will be understood that the board president may or may not attend every meeting, but they are a member of every committee. And I think what that does is it does multiple things. One, it keeps, if Lisa and Valerie wants to work on an issue or some item on the committee, you still have 2 other members on that committee that are not involved, and you are able to work out the details and then bring it back to committee for the other 2 to review prior to going to the full board. I think it gives us that opportunity to not have the potential of a majority discussing it, which is really the crux of why we even are having this discussion. So that's my thought. I would not try to split it up because I think that will become too wonky.
It makes complete sense when you say it that way. And if it's optional, I just, I worry about not that we all don't jump in. And I'll tell you what, I did love the option of just being able to poke my head into a committee meeting when I was interested in what was going on. That was the upside of virtual, right? Was I didn't have to drive downtown in order to bop into a policy meeting, and didn't have to stay the whole time, or things like that. So that was one of the great things about it. But I appreciate the fact that maybe it's that somebody's on vacation, or we remember those, right? And you're out of town, and so you let the president know, I won't be able to be there, and maybe that one in particular they can show up for, or something like that. Kind of how we do joint board of review, right? We've got alternates. So I can see it that way too. Thank you.
Mr. President, question?
Go ahead, Mr. Alexander.
Yeah, I'm listening to what we're saying. I think we can do some of this, but I want to make sure we all don't get overtaxed. So we're talking about two on 2 different committees. You're talking about basically 2 more meetings per month. So that's 4 meetings per month. If you have a special, it's 5. So I don't want us to get overtaxed either, because we all do have jobs that we have to work during the day, and it's going to be some work that we'll have to do. I mean, it's going to be a lot of work. So we're talking about these extra meetings each month for 12 months, and if we have to have any additional, which we will need to have additional meetings if we're going to put a levy on these next upcoming months, or even this whole year possibly. So we got to be careful with how we do it. And I know we want to make sure we stay within policy and doing things the right way, but we got to make sure we're sure as to what we're going to do, and make sure we can all attend, or how we will be able to handle all this the load. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Just making sure I wasn't muted. Anyone else?
So the question, based off what Mr. Alexander just said, it led me to a question around quorum for our committees. So is there a quorum that needs to be met? And maybe Mr. Pendleton knows the answer to this for each committee meeting. And if so, what is it? Because we used to have one member on each committee. So, I mean, I don't know what that is.
It's always a majority. By state law, it's always a majority of the members appointed to that committee.
Okay. So if there's 4 members, right, and we had a chair and a co-chair for each committee, those are your primary appointments. And then you have the president and a third member. You would work out where at least the president or that third member is at each meeting.
You would have
We could do it. Sorry, Ryan, were you saying something?
Yeah, no, I mean, you raise a good question, right? And I've talked with Dr. Hall a little bit and Ms. Autry and Finance Committee a little bit more about formalizing these committees more. So on one hand, we have a goal of formalizing committees and, for example, when a large initiative is being vetted throughout the district, we want to have multiple committees take a look at it. And so the formalization of that committee would look like, if it's a large academic program, we're going to take a look at finances and vet finances and lend our credibility to the organization that way. On another hand, if we formalize it to the extent of taking a vote, we could significantly limit ourselves in terms of flexibility, and then we'll always be trying to get a quorum vote. And we'll be making round robin calls. Hey, can so-and-so jump in the meeting? And Mrs. Mansfield raises a good question, one of which the legislature even paused at yet this year as to whether or not to reauthorize the virtual meeting status. So like you mentioned, Mrs. Mansfield, it's really easy to jump into meetings right now. It is hard enough for the 5th largest school district in the state of Ohio to be nimble at all times, especially during COVID. The last thing that we want to do is tie our hands. So I'm just brainstorming with you too. I'm kind of soaking it all in, taking some notes. I'm not sure we can finalize it today, but if we're taking steps in that direction first quarter and modifying board policies and those kind of things, I know we'll be successful in it. So just sharing random thoughts of the day.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And there was even a discussion during some, was doing my sunshine law training again recently. And there was even some discussion around that. Even to Dr. Akbar's point about building on innovations that you've developed during COVID, about whether or not, there would be even the entertainment of some idea of some level of participation like this moving forward. So I think this is a big question that's going to have to be answered at the state level. But Lisa's point is absolutely correct. It would definitely have added some difficulty if all of those meetings would have been in person and if we would have needed to establish a quorum in that manner. To Mr. Pendleton's point, look, we navigated successfully this year without having all of this in our written bylaws at the beginning of the year. We know what our standing committees are. We've established at least our intent, and certainly we can take action on that if we need to more formally, but I don't think we do necessarily. That our standing committees are now going to include an equity committee. It might be that we take some time and make sure that this works in all aspects before we adopt something off of the floor. But Mrs. Mansfield, you raised your hand.
Yeah, just procedural question then because you sent out the what we would like to be on sheet. Boy, that was really poorly phrased. How we'd like to serve next year. How's that? That's better. So going into that, are we planning for those 3 members plus, because there might be something that I've never been on that I might want to be the third member on or something. But so I guess I'm asking for January, are we going to go ahead and appoint 3 to the committees and then have our policy catch up? I'm kind of lost in that part.
So yes, well, yes and no. What we've talked about is what we did last year, which is rather than just tell us what committee you want to be on, rank all 4 committees in terms of your preference, first, second, third, fourth. And that's very similar to what we did this last year. If you recall, I asked everyone, since we only had the 3, to give me your first, second choice. And then by default, I knew what your third was. So what we'll ask everyone to do this year is just rank all of the committees so that we know what your first, second, third, and fourth choices are. That'll give us a good starting point, as I think, as we try and work through and have some folks double check, to make sure that this is going to work the way it intended, or the way it's intended. I mean, those are my thoughts. It's a discussion, so I'm open to.
Yeah, I've only got one comment, and that is regarding finance. So to the point about how having committees that vote can complicate things, I do think that there are items for which we should be voting on. From the standpoint of a committee votes to vote it out of committee, right? So, so that committee makes a recommendation on something like, there are certain sort of budgetary items that should come to finance first, that then we vote to make a recommendation to the board to approve, right? I mean, so I'm not saying that would have to be in place for every committee, but I do think that for finance, that would be a committee that I do strongly suggest that we configure in such a way so as to ensure that voting can occur. So that's my comment about that.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, Dr. Hall, in case it was also something I said, just to clarify, I think every committee has the ability to vote and should be voting. For example, instructional policy and student achievement, if they're looking to advance a particular piece of curriculum, should be able to vote that out of committee. The difference being, at least in my experience in the public sector, is not whether or not you're voting to say recommend something to the full board. It's whether, for example, the board delegated legal authority for you to adopt the budget for the whole board. So similar to, Boys and Girls Club or a Torchbearers or Child Guidance or Salvation Army or something else, where the board may authorize the property committee to go ahead and approve the purchase of a property and further authorize the executive director to sign a contract. We're not delegating that authority in this case, but that doesn't mean that you may not vote something out of committee. We're just not delegating the power of the full board to the committee, if that makes sense. That's my experience.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. That's been my experience as well.
So just along those lines, Dr. Hall, I think to me, if it's, and this is probably an assumption or maybe an assumption that shouldn't have happened. If something comes from a committee, right, or is being reported out by a committee, you're bringing it forward, to me, has always been enough to be a vet, at least a vetting. It's not a voting, but it's a vetting. And so to me, that was always kind of enough. Now, if we need it to be more formal, I don't have any problem with that, but that's how I always looked at it. So if you and Diana said, this is what we talked about in our committee, then I'm like, okay, they listened to all the nitty gritty details and they have brought this forward to the board. So it's good. And hopefully when Ms. McKittrick and I would do that, hopefully you felt the same way. They heard all the details. They have vetted this for the board. We've got all the information, we can go over it, but they've had the deep dive. So I don't have any problem with there being a vote as well, but that's just kind of how I viewed it over the years, is at least it's been vetted by my colleagues who are bringing it forward. So it's almost endorsed by their vetting.
Sure. Yeah. So my reply would be is, so I don't disagree with anything you said, but I guess the reason why I'm sort of coming back to this voting requirement is because hypothetically, I could envision there being items that, let's say, come to finance that because of, for whatever reason, whether time constraints, et cetera, it may have come to finance in a way that didn't allow for proper discussion within finance because there were other things on the agenda. I would not, from a process standpoint, I would not want that going to the full board until the finance committee had a chance to have all their questions asked and answered and be able to make that recommendation. So, but I can envision scenarios where that wouldn't happen. Oh, well, we just want you guys to have a look at it because this is going to go to the board next week, and I'm not okay with that. Like, from a process standpoint, finance, to your point, Ms. Mansfield, finance should vet it. It's the vote that signifies that the vetting has happened, and you all can rely upon that, right? So it doesn't come to you until it has been vetted, thoroughly and officially. And the official part is the vote, right? Where, hey, Ms. Autry and I have had the appropriate time to ask because if we run out of time, I don't want it going to the board, and because we haven't had time, because our committee has not had the time to appropriately vet it, to use your word, right? I think it's appropriate. I think it's an appropriate word to use. So that's why I'm saying if we start to build into our processes, okay, hey, much like the policy and legal contracts, there's got to be 3 readings unless there's an exception to the rule, right? There's 3 readings, and so that time is built into how we deploy and employ policies and procedures, right? So I think finance is, and again, I'm using finance as an example, right? But I'm sure you guys have examples with instructional policy, and then equity may also have an example as that committee gets rolling out. But again, I just want to make sure that we're building into the process for each of our committees time to discuss appropriately and vet before it goes to the board as a whole. That's all.
We didn't lose anyone, right? Okay. I just saw something pop up. I want to make sure we still have 4, 6, 7. Okay. And for what it's worth, and Mr. Alexander, I see your hand. I just want to say I can go along with what Dr. Hall is saying. I get that. Mr. Alexander?
Yeah, and what I appreciate what Dr. Hall said, because I personally always thought that's what we did. I mean, I've always been on the policy committee, and that was one of the things that when I first started, we looked at the policy and we brought it to the board just for the readings. But we thought as we moved forward, we didn't think that was proper, and that wasn't the proper way to do it, the right way to do it. So what we did is we said after we vet a policy and we look at the policy, then we're going to send out to the board so the entire board can look at it, have their input, give it back to us. We'll still have our next reading, but by the time we're ready for our 3rd reading, we'll have all the information there, and then we can move forward. So I'm maybe the other committees, since I haven't been on them, I have not done that, but I thought it was always a process of that committee vetted everything first, then it came to maybe to the board if we needed to come to the board at that point in time.
Yeah, and to your point, Dr. Hall, too, just to add, some more layers of bureaucracy and formality to the work that the committees do. It probably should be also, since those meetings need to be called to order, the minutes need to be kept, the minutes need to be approved, things need to be so, and all of those things require votes. So for the reasons that you said and probably others, I would agree with you, and I don't think it hurts to say we need to take a vote now to recommend this for full consideration by the full board. All those in favor. Mr. Pendleton looks like he has something also.
Yeah, as I hear the discussion going on, I know we're all heading somewhat in the same direction, maybe a little bit different on how we get there. So it is important to step back and take a look at the committees are different. Not only are they different in their purpose and scope, but they're different from the governance perspective. So legal and policy is probably the one standalone policy that is a true reflection of the board. So don't forget, remember in Ohio, that all decisions are the recommendation of a superintendent and either voted in favor or down by the Board of Education. Governance and policy is a little bit different. So personnel recommendations, academic programming, even athletics, it's just Ohio statute, right? It's the recommendation. David, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm taking this from the legal and policy perspective side of it, is upon the recommendation of a superintendent. And so the reason I'm just tapping the brakes on the vote, I think we're all heading in the same direction. It's not taking a vote or not taking a vote. I think it's, if it is, and in conjunction with the board policy, we're in great shape. If at any point in time we add another layer, then we need to have board policy and governance reflect that so that the votes are represented in the board policy. But David, this is where you probably need to say, but if a decision can't be had by the whole committee or the board as a whole, the superintendent still has the right in terms to offering a recommendation. And that's the part where I'm kind of struggling with this, because Dr. Hall and I talked about, well, what level do we want to put in this, right? So a new program that we're going to bring, and we talked about college and career academies, and so we needed to have a little bit more financial discussion about what's new funding, what's not, what's grant funded, right? We needed to have a little bit more depth and breadth to that conversation from finance. Absolutely so. And I'm just thinking through board policy. And again, I would just want to have that conversation with everyone so that you know what I'm thinking from that governance. So David, I know you probably have something to say.
Yeah, no, I think there's a little confusion. So when it came to the legal contracts and board policy committee, because there were readings, we had like the first reading would be done with the full board, then it would go to the policy committee for a reading, and that would be voted, and then go back to the board for the final, vote for approval. Historically, and it's similar, I'm an advisory trustee on the University of Akron board, and so when they have their committees, the main purpose of that are, as Dr. Hall asserted, are to ask questions, get clarity, and then make sure that the board's comfortable, for that particular. So if it's a finance and capital management, if we were approving, the initial contracts for the Kenmore Garfield COC, those would be things that we would review at the committee level. Really, there is no vote. There would just be questions asked. And then, of course, those fall under the consent agenda typically for those, contracts. So Ryan's right. I mean, those areas of, HR recommendations, our business affairs recommendations, and the resolutions will typically just go to the board. Now, when we have the policy, the committee structure, historically has been to make sure that those committee members can address questions from the other board members along with any, required staff. But, there's no vote on a personnel recommendation of mine in a committee. There would be some discussion. And if someone has an issue with one of my recommendations, you can always say, so we did this more recently, because take time and say, then you come back and address any questions or concern. But I think most of the thing about a vote out of committee really came regarding the readings on policy. I would suggest just confirm with legal counsel on that issue, just to get some clarity.
Good, and hopefully I haven't missed anything either, because I agree with what you're saying as well, Dr. James. That to me, in my mind, unless I've missed some conversation that maybe took place outside of committee meeting or anything, was just anything but those things that are reserved for the superintendent or for that are your recommendations. Those are completely different, as you said, by statute than something that is just coming as a recommendation from a committee on policy or on curriculum or something else. But Yeah, so good points. Dr. Akbar, you were unmuting. It looked like you might have something.
Yeah, I saw you talking. I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Yeah, so currently, if you look at our bylaw 0155, the current bylaw, it specifically and explicitly states that committees don't vote or make actions on behalf of the board. They review and make study of issues and make recommendations to the board. And so if you look at the way in which it's written now, I think that part was taken out. Oh no, well it's still there. Sorry, they just changed. It just changed the wording a little bit to acts in advisory capacity. That was added to the current language. I don't think that's in the original language. So I don't think there's a problem. Because I think it's already there. So we shouldn't be voting on anything in committee meetings, is basically what I'm saying. And if we do, we are operating outside of our own bylaws.
Right. At least as Dr. Hall and I said before, not in place of the board.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all saying the same thing. I mean, we're not talking about conferring legal authority to finance committee to pass a budget, for example. You know, it's a vote to recommend, not a vote to approve at the level. So I think that's the nuance that's there. So I think we're all on the same page.
I would just disagree with you on that, only because there's no vote. There should be no voting at all at a committee meeting.
So then I think that we should talk about that then, because I guess what I'm searching for here is a process that by which a committee makes a recommendation. So
in this scenario, Dr. Hall, it's possible for the committee to disagree. And what is the mechanism for saying we're either sending this to the board or we're, the board or not? It's fully baked or it's not. That's right. You know, so and maybe this is semantics, and maybe we need to alter the policy, right, to allow for that. Because we're not talking about an ORC violation. We're talking about something that, to Dr. Akbar's point, something that's not consistent with our own policy, right? So maybe that's the adjustment we make, is maybe we amend the policy, to allow for that. But I would again, but I stand fast on saying that there should be a mechanism by which we approve or recommend something going to the full board. So what the words we use, either it's an issue of semantics or it's an issue of we need to change the policy, or both. So if I might make a recommendation in the interest of even just time to, although it's an unwritten rule, we've always given deference to board members if they ask for some additional time on a policy like this to figure out whatever the question is or whatever the issue might be. I think it's fair what Dr. Hall is asking. Could I recommend, I don't think it will delay us in any significant way if Dr. Akbar and I go ahead and ask for folks to rank their preferences for committee assignments and cluster assignments on that sheet and send it back to us. Maybe not on that sheet, just send them to us in an email so it doesn't mess up the sheet, I guess. But give us your committee and cluster assignments by preference, 1st through 4th on your committee assignments, and obviously 1st through 6th on your cluster assignments. Let us know if you're interested in one of the other assignments like OSBA trustee and things like that, and at least one of you already has. And then let's have some continued discussion around this policy. That's my recommendation. I'd rather us not legislate from the floor because I think we're going to inevitably run into some problems, and we could be here for quite a while trying to figure this out. Anybody agree or disagree? Is that okay? Okay, well then let's do that. Send me and Dr. Akbar your preferences, please. If you could put us both on the email. and let us know what your preferences are for the committee and cluster assignments. And I sent you that worksheet. If you have any questions, let us know. Currently, I think I'm an OSBA alternate. If you need to know who's doing that, Bruce, you're the OSBA trustee. Cube representative is Dr. Akbar, is that correct? So just let us know what your preferences are if you have any questions. And then
Hey, Patrick, can I throw something in? And this is not a policy. This is just practice. A couple of years ago, a request was made that when we did the OSBA trustee position, that we felt like you spent the first year really getting to know what the heck your responsibilities were and how you could best be of use. And then they started using you and putting you on committees, and we transferred someone out. So a couple of years ago, we started making that a 2-year appointment. But I'm just throwing that out there. We changed the alternate, I think, but I think that we left the person there for 2 years because they only meet 4 times a year. So by the time you figured out what you were doing, it was time for you to come off. So just throwing that out there.
And to Lisa's point, by the time they start asking you to serve or do something particular, lead a committee, we're taking you off. So we did talk about that. And Bruce is already in that position and has already expressed interest. So I'll just throw that out there as well. And Bruce, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say also with that committee, we stated that we wanted it to possibly be 2 years unless the board member who is currently in that position states they want to only do it for 1 year. They had an option to stay for a 2-year term, or they could come off after 1 year if they wish to.
And there's no written rule. So, I mean, if you're interested, let us know, but that's the deference that we've given to the person that's kind of in that position.
Mr. President, I have another suggestion. With the policy 0155, can I suggest that we all read that? And if we have any questions, to maybe send the questions to you and Dr. Akbar so that you guys can get those questions. I think we all need to understand and know what that policy states. And so we understand, I think we're all on the same page. I think we're getting into either we're going to make a vote out of a committee or we're not. Everything is a recommendation that comes out of the committee. And so it's all recommendations and not votes. So I think it'd be good for all of us to read. And if we have any questions, send the questions to you and Dr. Akbar, and then you guys can share them with us. And then we can possibly be able to move forward with some of this.
Agree. And I saw Dr. Akbar agreeing as well. You all have that policy. If you need me to re-forward the link, as a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and copy the link and put it in the chat now. But you all have access to that policy. It's also in the last board meeting. If you need to pull it up by going to the last agenda, if you lose this link once we're out of the meeting. But yeah.
You can find all the documents that is shared with you in your Google Drive.
Yep.
So
And
at the top, you can click on Drive. Sorry.
Dr. Akbar, this also came out of legal and board policy. So, but there's not another meeting, of course, scheduled before the organizational meeting. Do we want to ask for folks to get us some questions and comments and thoughts back by so that we can start having staff and legal take a look at those? Do we want to say next Wednesday or next Friday?
So I'm okay with either. The one thing I'll share is that our current bylaw is so vague that we can start the year and operate the way in which we believe that the policy is going to act and still be in accordance with the current policy. The current policy states that each committee will have at least 2 members and that the president will serve as ex officio. So if we wanted to appoint 3 people, we could, because it still meets the at least 2 members. And it doesn't specifically name any of the committees, which we are putting that into the policy, but we can act that way because it's not in disagreement with the current policy. So if we're going to go forward, I think what you just said, Mr. Bravo, makes sense. It will be up for second reading technically at the committee meeting in January, which Ms. Alexander, correct me if I'm wrong, we still haven't come to a consensus on that date yet. I think we are on like round 3 of that battle royale. So I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, then how about we just say sometime by around the organizational committee meeting, because you're not going to meet before that. So sometime by around Monday, January 11th, if you guys could at least give us some kind of feedback if you still have questions. Because certainly by then we'll be scheduling committee meetings. And I agree fully with Dr. Akbar. That's what I was saying earlier. We did this year the same way under the same bylaw, because ever since we got rid of those rules and regulations, we've been operating the same way. There's nowhere in writing where we have our standing committees listed. So I don't think we're falling afoul of anything. And I think we're fine. So, so this committee policy or bylaw is something that we would ask that you take a look at, and also sending us your preferences for committee and cluster assignments if you could. And those we would need as soon as possible. I would say sometime next week would be good. Please. All right. Anything else on the committee bylaw? Okay. Then moving us along then to our final topic, just a review a little bit, and then opening up for any discussion that anyone might want to have on our organizational meeting. Just a reminder, at our last meeting, we elected a president pro tem, Mrs. Mansfield. Mrs. Mansfield will open our organizational meeting, and by statute, that's where we have to, it has to be within the first 15 days of the year, which of course it is. It's on January 11th. We have to elect a president and a vice president, and so at a minimum, those requirements must be met. Prior to that, within the last 30 days or so at the end of the year, the treasurer is supposed to poll us for a meeting date for our organizational meeting, but we've already also done that already too. So we're pretty good for that. Mrs. Mansfield will open up the meeting, call us to order, run the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we will go right into officer nominations. And we will, by our own bylaws as well, nominate and elect a president first, and then nominate and elect a vice president first. Nominations are made from the floor. There's a first and a second for each nomination. There's typically, especially if there's more than one nomination, there's a motion to close nominations, a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Nominations are closed. And after the nominations are closed, then we have votes on president and vice president. So just know that I'm talking about both. If there's more than one nominee, then it's whoever wins the majority. If there's no majority, if for some reason there was a split or something crazy, someone's absent and there's a tie, then it can go to subsequent votes. But typically it's one vote for each president and vice president. And they are voted on separately. And I think that's about it. Are there any questions about the process itself? Just the nominations, the votes. I mean, everyone was present for the last one, so I think we're all pretty good on that. And now I'm going to open it up for discussion about the organizational meeting or about leadership. If you have questions about leadership, if you are interested in leadership and you would like to let us know, either president or vice president, feel free to jump in. This is an open discussion. If there is none, then we'll wrap up for the evening. But I want to give everybody a chance to have that conversation if you would like to. Okay. I'm not seeing or hearing any. Going once, going twice. All right. Is there anything else then for the good of the order this evening? Is there any other topic? Oh, Dr. Akbar does. He's like he's reading my mind or something. If you have any other comments, questions, concerns, anything related to what we talked about tonight that you want to touch on or you forgot to say, now's the time to jump in. Dr. Akbar, go ahead.
Yes, I think that on January 11th, we have to have the organizational meeting and all the mandatory requirements for that. But we also have a few items that are going to be pertinent. I think we're going to need to make the approval for the brochure for the superintendent search, as it's supposed to launch on January 12th. So that's fun. But then the other thing that we haven't talked about fully in a while, but is necessary based off the last email that Mr. Pennington sent, which if he wants, he can resend the timeline again. But January 11th, we need to pass have the discussion about the levy and pass a resolution of necessity for the levy, which will then go and get us our certifying tax valuation for that levy if we want to put it on the ballot for May. I don't know if we need to have tons of discussion about that, but I think that definitely needs to be on the agenda. Maybe we've already made up, our minds. We've had a lot of conversations about levy, but that is a pending deadline that's coming up, which will also mean the following weeks with the finance committee and their recommendation, not their vote, but their recommendation of the levy amount, and then our final resolution that preceding meeting. So that is heavy, but that's also very important, I think, so that we can begin thinking about that in our dreams in the next few days.
Yeah, and thank you, Dr. Akbar. Mr. Pendleton, if it wouldn't be too much, could you, just so that it's at the top of everyone's email, you had sent out the timeline previously, because I mentioned that earlier in the meeting. That timeline is shorter at the beginning of the year if we were to consider 2 attempts or 2 bites at the apple if needed. And so Dr. Akbar is 100% right. Like, that discussion needs to begin because we don't have the committee meeting scheduled yet. So we probably need to be having a full board discussion about that anyway. And I'm not sure, Mr. Pendleton, what other information you might want to provide us ahead of that, but I do think at least the timeline so that we can all see it again at the top of our emails.
I'm forwarding it now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Anything related to comments tonight?
Patrick, can I jump in with something?
Yes,
Just a lot of questions are being asked again online regarding plans for the second semester, and wondering if David wants to talk a little bit about what all we know other than Remote Plus to hopefully start with that second semester. Is there anything you want to share with us about that as we're coming out?
The same thing I did at our last board meeting about, returning with Remote Plus and then looking at our second semester, whether we can, so part of that is requiring people to show up in person, and that's been an issue. For some classifications of employees, it can't be voluntary because what we've looked at for the number of students that need that in-person, assistance, we have to have people there. There are some buildings where we have enough volunteers, but the majority of our buildings, it won't work because we don't have enough volunteers. So that's something that we have to work out. The other issue is the governor has already said the next phase of vaccinations are going to be people, I think, 65 and older. And then he specifically mentioned frontline people, particularly teachers and people who work in schools, in order to get our kids back. So we have a lot of work to do, as we get more numbers of vaccines out in the community that I'm sure many of our staff will feel more comfortable having a vaccine and coming to work than what we have now. So Again, we're focused on getting that remote plus to make sure we can provide that assistance, you know, to those students who need it. And looking at, you know, how that can impact our start of the second semester, which is actually in the middle of January.
And I'm referring people back to that meeting and saying, hey, it was probably, you know, into the holidays and you weren't paying attention, or because there was some discussion as to some meeting dates that we don't actually even have on the calendar that were coming up that we were going to vote. And I said, no, that's not happening. So just referring people back to what you just said, and also what we have in December. Also, if there's anything that comes up, through the governor, I know that he did make the possibility that we'll be offering that the state will be offering those vaccinations to schools that are going to reopen, but it was rather open-ended. I think that was that they had planned to reopen on or by March 1st, but I didn't know if that was a hard and fast thing he discussed further.
Right, and that's what we know right now, because I heard the same, I think, press conference that you heard when he made the comment, but a lot of that's going to be dependent upon how fast we can get more of the vaccine to get this first group of people finished and then move on to that next phase if we're to be included in that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. Bishop, for the question. Anyone else? Final comments, thoughts, questions? Well, again, I want to just say thank you on behalf of Dr. Akbar and myself. Just thank you for taking the time out for another evening to spend with us. Appreciated hearing all of you, from all of you, about your thoughts on our successes and challenges and what our goals are for next year. I think that APS advanced document or advanced APS document is really going to be a good foundation for us to move forward into 2021. And I think we have a lot to be proud of this year, despite everything that we've kind of faced as a group. So really proud of all of you. Thank you for all of your hard work this year. Hope you get to enjoy the new year. And I know we're all looking forward to putting 2020 behind us. And thank you again. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Everyone have a happy new year.
Happy New Year.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye-bye.